Welcome to the String Shop for the next video in our series on how to build a fiddle. In the last video, we went ahead and completed our scroll, peg box, neck, thicknessed our fingerboard, and attached these two together. Well, the next step in our journey is to attach this neck to the corpus. This step in the process is not insanely difficult. It's simply a matter of precision. You need to have your center line clearly marked on your corpus and on your neck. The first thing we're going to do is position the neck exactly where it's going to go, pin it in place, and we'll make some marks. The first thing we do is measure the width of the neck right here at the heel. I have 32 millimeters. Then we'll transfer those marks to the corpus here. This is to ensure that our neck is vertical and not canted left or right. Now we double check our marks here and here and make sure everything is in alignment. If our heel wasn't cut perfectly, we may have to make some small adjustments at this point. Now we remove our neck, and our very first cut will be right here on this top lip. Just like our fingerboard and neck are angled, our cuts also need to be angled too. Our very first cut will be a line between those 2 points just above the purfling. I'm going to score these 3 places and then remove a layer and come back and score and remove a layer until I get all the way down to the end block. A word of caution here: if you come in and try to pry this off in one piece, you will dislodge the top from the sides. Just come in after you've scored and take a little bite and a little bite right here. Look at little at a time. Be gentle. And if it doesn't jump right off, go back and score it again. You can see how good that tight bond holds now. Then just clean that up a little bit. Now we're going to get in here and start fitting this dovetail joint. We insert this from the top down because of the angle we cut. Now you see, I still need to make some adjustments here so that this will sit flush. Once you have the neck fit perfectly and you've lined it back up and clamped it in place, instead of using a pencil, I'm going to score this using my knife blade because it's more accurate. Score these 2 lines well and use your chisel to slowly remove the side and work your way down and expose the end block. After scoring this, I hold my chisel at an angle up like this, and I work my way down on either side and then just clean out the middle. Now that we have this piece removed, you want to score the left and right sides of your dovetail joint again, and using a chisel, work your way down towards that line that we cut, slowly and carefully. We're going to be chalk fitting that neck in this slot. As we carve our dovetail joint and fit our neck, it's very important that we get the neck angle just right. This angle is called the projection angle because we project the angle of the strings that occurs here at the bridge. Now this angle affects the downward pressure of the strings through the bridge onto the top of our instrument, thereby affecting the tone of our instrument. Let me show you a little gadget you can make to set this angle correctly. We just start with a scrap of dry straight wood at least 14 inches long. This piece is 3/8 of an inch by 9/16, and this is a scrap of a 1/4 inch dowel. Let's just drill a hole near the end of our piece for our dowel. Using whatever device you prefer, make a mark at 27.1 millimeters. 27.1. Then we'll put a little drop of glue on there and insert our dowel into the wood we just drilled till we get to the line, and then double check for accuracy. Make sure that's accurate. We're going to cut this piece off, trim this end, and then one more cut. Now butt your tape up against that dowel and measure 12 3/4 inches or 324 millimeters. Your choice. You can clean up your new tool with a little sandpaper, but leave this dowel square. We did that on purpose for accuracy. Grab some rubber bands and let's try this thing out. This end must sit flush with the end of the fingerboard, and our goal is to have that dowel just kiss the top of our fiddle. Now you can accurately set your projection angle as you carve your dovetail joint. For whatever it's worth, I like to get my end block flush right here with my cut, and then I'll slowly work down towards the bottom, deepening the bottom section. Secondly, and it helps me to be able to control the final angle of the neck a little better. Needless to say, you want razor sharp tools, and you want to use a wider chisel at this point. This one is 1/2 inch right now, but I will use my 3/4 to help me keep this nice and flat. As you work on your dovetail joint, I try to get my neck angle right first before I worry about the neck sitting all the way down in my V groove. And it should be nice and snug. No glue, Ma. See? When we have the angle right, then we can take a file and we can work this little V groove a little bit until our neck fits down nice and snug. Now you can see my projection angle is a little bit high, but that's okay. See, my heel has a little ways to go in my dovetail joint. It becomes a little bit of a juggling act at this point. Now don't get nervous. We're controlling the neck, not only angle up and down, but we have to be careful that we don't let it go askew this way. As you're carving your dovetail joint, make sure it stays flat this way and flat this way, and whatever you do as you adjust these sides, you do it evenly so the neck doesn't cant off to one side or the other. My projection angle is perfect. My neck is sitting nicely down in the dovetail joint. One more thing this little tool does for us, as we look down from above and we have our tool centered on the center line of the fingerboard, it will show us whether or not we are lined up with the center line of our fiddle plate. And I'm off just a little bit. This simple little tool we made out of some scraps can tell you more than the naked eye. It's really important to have our fingerboard lined up with our center line. Take a look at my fiddle right now. Does that look centered to you, lined up nicely? Looks pretty close. Some would say it's dead on, but that tool showed me that I was off just a hair. The adjustments at this point in the dovetail joint are going to be minute, like the thickness of a piece of paper. So let's do a little chalk fitting and get this joint perfect. Simply use a piece of chalk to apply a layer of chalk to the heel end of my fingerboard, and then I'll carefully fit it in place. Take it off, and what I want to see is chalk evenly spread over the entire surface. Now, I've done this a couple of times, so my first shot out of the box came out pretty good. If you have just a couple of small areas that the chalk rubbed off on, those are your high spots, and you want to carefully take them down. You can take one of your chisels and just use it vertically as a little scraper and gently scrape away, wipe off the surface, reapply the chalk, and do it again until you have a very nice fit. Well, I finished fitting my neck to my fiddle body. I have my heat lamp warming up the wood, so I'll have a nice glue joint. My glue is hot. And then in preparation for gluing on the neck, I have chamfered these edges all the way around to allow the glue to squeeze out a little bit and not risk a hydrolock. Then I take a little bit of hide glue, because this is the end grain of the wood. I want to seal it, because I know it's going to absorb more than the rest. And then I'm going to wipe off the excess and allow this to dry. And then once this is dry, we can go to town and attach the neck to our fiddle. All right, it's the moment of truth. Let's do it. Just going to apply a nice layer of glue over the entire joint. Not to forget to put glue on the button. That's important. And then let's fit this baby in. Wiggle a little bit, get the air bubbles out, press it down to where it goes. Eyeball it, still nice and straight. Yes. Now I'm going to put a clamp on it, and then we let her dry. This step is always really exciting for me. It's the culmination of quite a few hours of work. Looking good. Looks kind of like a fiddle, doesn't it? Well, before we can put strings on it, I really should finish the button. And I'm going to need a nut up here and a saddle. So I'm going to start on the button first. All I'm going to do is get in here with my trusty knife and just whittle it down until it's really close. I love the stuff you can just do in your lap. This will only take a few minutes. Now I am going to get in here with a file. Here's my button all done, my little cathedral window. We're getting close to calling this done. My glue is heating up for my nut and my saddle. The nut is really straightforward. Just put your nut blank here. I'm going to trace, then I'm going to cut it 1 millimeter taller than the fingerboard. The saddle goes down here. I'm going to center it and then cut a little place for it and glue it in its place. My nut is already the correct thickness. I'm going to make it flush with this side. On the outside, trace my fingerboard, trace the inside, and then I'm going to add 1 millimeter to 1.5 millimeters here and cut it. Here is how I am going to cut it. It's ready to go. A little glue on the bottom, and in she goes. I'm just going to hold it in place. And that's it. The saddle is 34 millimeters wide, and it sits 7 millimeters in from the outside edge. Just like before, we score our 3 lines, and then we very carefully remove small pieces at a time and work our way down to the end block. My groove is all cut and cleaned out, and now we just apply a little old hide glue and insert our saddle. And just hold it until the glue sets. We don't need to clamp it. I bet you never thought this day would come. We are essentially all done building our fiddle. There are a few things left to do before it's a playable instrument. Here's another look at how the button came out. Here's the nut installed and shaped, all ready for setup. And here's my saddle. The saddle should extend 4 millimeters above the top plate, and then file and shape it to match this curve nicely. The only thing left to do to this instrument would be to install the pegs. Let me talk to you about that. Your tuning pegs will have come slightly oversized. Even your end pin may be oversized. We measure them just below this collar here. These 2 pegs are still a hair over 9 millimeters in diameter. We're shooting for 7 to 7.5 millimeters right here at the collar. Well, how do we get from point A to point B? Well, there's a couple ways we can do that, and we need to provide a matching hole in our instrument. This started as just an experiment. I grabbed a scrap block of maple and I cut it on the table saw, clamped it, and I added a hinge I found in my scrap pile to one end. Then I drilled 2 holes, one up here near the top and one here smack dab in the middle of the 2 pieces. Using my peg reamer, I reamed out the holes to the correct size. On this top one, I used a blade and I fashioned what amounts to a large pencil sharpener to rough in my pegs. Then if I open my little gadget, I can take a little scrap piece of 80 grit sandpaper, add my peg, close it, and apply some pressure, and correctly shape my tuning peg. This works fairly well. Of course, if you choose to buy a nice professional peg shaver, That will work pretty good too. Make sure you take your knife and gently score around the collar before you finish using your little peg shaver so it doesn't chip out. Once you have your pegs at the correct size, polish them with a little piece of 600-400 grit sandpaper. Now we can move on to our fiddle. I'm making a little mark right here at 13 millimeters away from the collar as the starting point for fitting our tuning peg. As you prepare to remount your peg holes, remember our mantra, take it slow. It is really easy to go way too far with this thing. Watch and see. Now, make sure you're reaming from the correct side, okay? It'll be real embarrassing if all your pegs are on backwards. While you're reaming, it's important to make sure this tool remains 90 degrees to the center line of the instrument. That's why we drilled the holes when this was a square block. And parallel with the top surface of your fiddle. And just slow and easy, keeping your tool nice and straight. It's easy to get it all cockeyed. And then once you've gone a little ways, blow out your chips, take your peg, gently fit it, and see how it goes a little at a time until you get to your 13 millimeter mark. We're kind of running out of things to do to our fiddle. At this point, you could string it up and play it. We've come to the end of this segment of how to build a fiddle. And ordinarily, I would have strung this bad boy up and played you a little tune, except when I was cutting the nut, I sort of ran my finger into the bandsaw as the blade was winding down. If you look at 16 minutes and 13 seconds, you'll get a glimpse. I superglued it back together, and she's still pretty sore, so I need time to recover. In the next video, I'm going to take off the fingerboard, and I'm going to varnish it. And then, hopefully, we can play it. I'll see you then.